Hey there, I'm Lydia Walker, and in this video, I take you behind the scenes of the Rustic Songbird Podcast, where I interview Amy Savin about leading a congregation by example and the servant heart of a worship leader. I hope you enjoy this conversation, and I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel for even more episodes like this coming soon. My guest on the show today is Amy Savin. She is a singer-songwriter and worship leader, and we've been friends for a long time. We met by traveling and playing music, and we've stayed connected, and I just really wanted Amy to come on the show, share some of her story and what she's been thinking about lately, and just kind of her take on what's going on in the world today and how we can learn and grow through this season. So Amy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a ride with me and you. It's been, I don't remember when we met, but we've been friends all these years.
I was trying to remember, like, the first time we talked or met. It may have been MySpace. I don't know.
Yeah.
It may have been through, like, mutual friends in Nashville. And then I remember we played at a coffee shop together. But that wasn't the first time we met. So I don't really know when we first met, but I feel like I've known you forever. So
yes,
thank you for making the time to be on here, and I just appreciate what you're doing, and I like having different perspectives on the show, and your story is really interesting to me. I know you grew up in Canada and now you're in the United States, so that's a whole story in itself, but tell me a little bit about, like, your music, getting started in writing songs, recording, putting out music, being a worship leader, all the things.
Yeah, so I grew up in Toronto, near Toronto, Ontario, basically most of my life. My parents immigrated to Canada from Australia, so I have lots of family in Australia, in Canada, and now in the US. But grew up as a PK, pastor's kid, very conservative church, so grew up with pews, hymnals, choir, choral music. To be honest, like, I didn't have my feet wet in a lot of musical genres. It was pretty much like church music. But what I feel like that did to me was made me so rich in harmony and the integration of parts and voices and that really influenced me as a musician and as a writer. I feel like a lot of people that grew up in my church denomination, we have a really good ear for harmony, and so I have to, celebrate that. But for the most part, like, the environment that I grew up in, people didn't go out and perform and do music. Like, it was a simple way of life. A lot of my peers got married, started a family, and, like, that was kind of the thing. And I kind of veered off and started to create music and perform and travel. And I didn't have people in my life that were doing that at all. I was this lone ranger. So I didn't know you could have a music career. It wasn't until university where a friend of mine was like, Amy, you need to record. I was like, what do you mean? Like, how? I'm not, I probably told him, I was like, I'm not signed to a record label. I can't record. I had no idea, like, about independent artists, like, not at all. So yeah, he introduced me to some producers. Well, actually a producer that was kind of low budget, and once I got a taste for the recording scene, I remember listening to Christian artists that I had newly discovered. Like, Bethany Dylan was an artist that we both really loved.
Yes.
Right. And when I heard her record, I was like, I need to get my songs to sound like that. Like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And that's actually when I remember maybe meeting you for the first time. Somehow, this is another story of itself, but on my first record, I got to record with Ed Cash. I mean, from this, like, literally in the, like, nobody, like. just this
So
random Toronto girl.
yeah, were you one to like look at the back of the CD cover and say, okay, whoever produced Bethany Dylan, that's who I want to record with? Is that how it happened?
That's exactly how it went. Looked at the name Ed Cash. I was like, cool, like that needs to happen.
Yeah, like it has to be him.
It has to be, like, I was so ignorant. Like I didn't know producers. I didn't know musicians, but I was like, I like her. It's the whole
I love it.
makes me laugh. But yeah, I think we recorded Hymn 177, which was the title of a song that I rewrote the melody to. And I hung out with Lydia Walker.
In person, yeah.
Person.
Outside of Nashville, I remember getting together and got to hear you play live.
Yeah.
And your friend Laura was traveling with you. She would like play the cajon or play the djembe or something for you, and you guys sing together. Yes. And I just thought it was cool that you girls were traveling. I think you were planning a Europe tour at the time and just traveling with your music, doing radio play. And I was like, who is this girl? Like, she's amazing.
We were just, honestly, we were winging it. And it was so fun. Like, yeah, my first record I recorded with Ed Cash, my first tour is in Europe, because that all makes sense, right? Like, you're going to tour your record, just first go to Europe. I don't know. The Lord was having fun with me. The Lord was giving me an easy, like I felt like the beginning of my career was really easy, and then it got really hard.
Well, let's talk about your music video where you met this guy named Peter.
Yes.
And ended up marrying the guy. So tell us a little bit about that, because it just seems like, you know, God brought you to the right place at the right time for that to happen.
Oh yeah, that whole season. I mean, in the midst of all of that, coming out with a record, recording in Nashville, doing album promo, not meeting Peter. I knew him, but we had never really hung out. But that whole season, yeah, he found out I was shooting a video, and he was not far away from where we were shooting, because he was on tour with a band doing video work for them. And we had been in touch. He was a friend of the family, and he's like, I'm just kind of like, he's like, I love video. I love to practice. Let me stop by and help you shoot your videos. And I was like, yes, please. Like, free is always great, right?
Sure.
At least it was close to free. He was not charging me very much at all. But yeah, I think over the course of the few days we worked together, he went to Michigan, I was in Ontario. He was in Michigan, which is right next to Ontario. And we started talking about the color scheme and corresponding. And within days, so not minutes, days, like the Lord kind of showed me, like, this is somebody you need to pay attention to. It's the weirdest thing, Lydia. I don't understand it.
It's amazing. I love when God does things like that and just like puts people in your path right when you need to meet them, and like makes it so obvious.
Oh yeah. I mean, of course there's more to that story, but it is a bizarre story. I don't suggest to people, like, you met somebody and then like a week later or 2 weeks later talk about like engagement. Like, I don't suggest that, but there was just this no.
Yeah, you just know when you know.
Yes.
That's so cool. And so you got married. I mean, not right after, not within minutes.
Not within minutes or weeks.
Yeah, but you got married. You immigrated to the U.S. from Canada.
Yes.
And I remember that happening and you saying, this is really difficult. Like, it would be way easier to be born in the United States, but having to work through like paperwork and get all of that citizenship stuff together. Didn't that take like a year?
Long process. It was kind of a nightmare. Like, it was so involved. At the time, like, I was planning a wedding, finishing up my university degree, touring, doing like live television. Did I say immigrating already? There was so much going on in my world. Yeah. I was on my honeymoon sending in my thesis. I was at Disney World about to go to the park, and I was sending in my final paper to university. And I was like, having to document everything that I did with Peter as proof that we were in a relationship for immigration. Like, there were just so many things to keep track of.
Wow. Yeah. You had a few things going on.
Yes. Yes.
Oh man. So do you feel like you're in a way more settled place at this point? I mean, I think, didn't you say you just moved into a house a year ago, and like you guys, you're working at a church now, leading worship. So does it still feel like the roller coaster that it began as, or do you feel like it's kind of smoothed out since then?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's been 7 years now since Peter and I have been married. I think especially with coronavirus, everyone's life kind of has chilled out some. I know some people feel busier, but yes, currently my life is a lot more simple. It's been a lot of crazy in between. Like from touring, coming out with a record, moving into a new home, leaving a steady job at a church that I was at. Like I had just exited another kind of crazy season. But sometimes you just know that that's kind of how it is, and it's not going to be that way forever. Case in point, we're all sitting at home with more than enough time to watch Netflix, which I don't recommend if that's how you spend all your time.
Or watching the news. I've just told people to turn off the news at this point.
Yeah, no kidding. Like, if you want good news, do not turn on the news.
Yeah, but in a way, like, this is such a great restart for so many people to really think, what is most important in my life? What do I really need or want to be doing? And like getting back to the basics. And so it really is a good opportunity, I think, for musicians that are figuring things out and just looking at things in a new way, or going from being super busy to now having more time to think through their future, like think through what they're doing now, and like, do they want to go back to how it was, or do they want to do things differently? So just being kind of forced into change. So I know you had a big tour planned and then everything got canceled. So how has that been for you? I mean, you can talk through the emotional side of that, or through like, how you've pivoted during this season just in the last few months. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I labored for about 6 years with my latest record, not because that's what I wanted, but there were so many obstacles in the way. And then June 2019, we finally release it. And it's this huge expectation, like finally I can tour, finally, like I can reap the reward of my labor and like see the fruit of it, and like all this excitement and energy. And halfway through your album cycle, it's like everything shut down, So like I was on tour in Canada, I went just when things got really bad, which is interesting. Like I returned home a day before the US and Canada borders were closed.
Wow.
So like it was kind of psycho. The Detroit airport was like a ghost town. Like everything was brand new. No one knew what was going on. We probably still don't know what's really going on. But it was a really weird time for sure. But to be honest, like, and the other thing was like I was the record was nominated for Canadian Christian Music Awards, and I had been invited to play at the ceremony. So like all these huge events that are now shut down. And you're just like, oh my goodness, like some really big opportunities that don't happen all the time are now taken away from you. To be honest, I never really let discouragement hit me. I feel like my God story, my God history is so rich that like it takes a lot to get me down. Like it takes, really, honestly, it takes a lot. I don't know. And to me, that is something that is so precious to me. Like, I love that the Lord can trust me with a lot of pain, not because he delights in giving me pain, but because of the history we have. Anyways.
Yeah, I know that your faith has been a huge part of being a writer anyway, and just sharing what you've learned through your walk with God, and also being a worship leader and having that shepherding heart of building community and pouring into a church body and like serving your congregation as a worship leader. That's just so different. I know as I lead worship as well, like it's a different thought process and just a different experience than being a performer. and just being on stage, you know, performing this song, you're literally, as a worship leader, you're trying to give people the opportunity to connect with God. And so it takes a lot of time, you know, preparing your own heart to be worshiping, you know, as a leader. You're leading by example, and like, you know, so you need to have a prayer life, and your walk with God is what's going to be reflected and like overflowing to that congregation. So can we talk about that and just kind of what that looks like for you?
I think you're absolutely right, Lydia. I feel like the last 6-7 years, I was thrown into the worship leading world, which I never thought I'd be a worship leader. I grew up in a church where that was not a thing. I had no idea what modern worship was, let alone a worship leader. So it's funny to me that was where I found myself for this almost a decade. And you're right, you cannot get up on stage, at least if you're going to do it well, and fake it. You can't. I learned from leaders beyond, who were further ahead in their worship leading journey, that you can't take people to a place in worship where you have never been yourself with the Lord. Like, worship leading
That's good.
is being a tour guide for the congregation to places you've already been. And so when you're doing that hard work on a daily basis, when you are ministering to God's heart every day out of necessity to do your job, I mean, I felt really spoiled that, like, this is what I have to do. Like, because I realized, like, not everybody gets hours a day to fall on their faces for the Lord. It's just, they're a mom, they're a doctor, whatever they do. But in my job, like, I got to do that. And so what that does, though, is that, like, you're constantly in the King's reality, day and night. And I can't help but look at the world around me, look at relationships, and notice where the hope has been lost, and then notice where hope wants to enter in, and just always seeing that. So, like, in every season that feels hard, that feels like a season of loss, like, my eyes are so instantly connected to what hope is doing, where God is moving. I mean, not always, I'm not superhuman, but I feel like I've created pathways in my brain that my instant reaction is one of light and one of hope. But that wasn't always the case. That was not always the case. And I've shared my story of overcoming anxiety and depression like a few weeks ago on my Facebook Live. But yeah, so for like such a time as this, when I see just like so much anxiety or people feeling helpless and hopeless, to me, this is like, wow, what an opportunity to redirect the conversation. What an opportunity to highlight what heaven is thinking and where heaven is moving. So yeah, I'm super grateful for those opportunities to have learned that.
Yeah, and in a time where that's being tested for so many people, to just see that your reaction is different than how you would have reacted before, because of the time you put in, because of that connection, and like you said, growing that relationship with God. And then even when the circumstances make people fearful and have anxiety, and you were even prone to that before, and then not having that reaction now because of the depth of your relationship with God, and just the knowing him and knowing that he's still in control. So wow, I mean, what a cool journey, what an amazing testimony to, to speak to. This is something I would have struggled with if I was trying to do it in my own power, but because of how the Lord has led you to this point in your life, you're able to see and like discern with kingdom eyes. That's really incredible. So could you share some of what you're learning in this season as you're, trying to encourage people through this season, and people that are struggling and maybe are realizing that there's a gap between where they are and where they want to be with the Lord and with their relationship with Christ?
Yeah. I think when we first entered into this lockdown, and to me, you just saw the internet exploding with emotion.
Yeah.
To me, immediately I thought like, wow, what is really inside of each of us is really coming out, because you don't know what's deep down. You don't know what the flavors of a tea bag are until they're immersed in boiling water, and then you see the color, you see the flavor. And
yeah.
I thought instantly, like, this season is exposing our insides, our very core. Yeah. And it's a heart check for me, because any time that I feel I am on edge, or that I'm not coping with the mind of Christ, like, I know right away where to check with the lies. Okay, what lie are you believing, or where are you placing your identity, or what narrative are you believing? So I chat with the Lord through that. I think one of the things that I am so passionate about is teaching people to hear the voice of God, because that is God's promise to us. Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, they know my voice. If Jesus is the model for humanity on what right living with the Father looks like, and his life consisted of deep intimacy, of him building an upper room on a daily basis and hearing for God's voice, well, then that is my goal. That is my example. And one of the things that I've been saying a lot in these quarantine times is the promise of God is not that his kids won't suffer. The promises of God is that we're always together. And when God is present, it changes everything, because he is giving his input. Everything the Father says is life-giving, everything. Even if it's a correction, it's life-giving. And so what's happening in these times is everyone is listening to their community, to the news, to memes, to social media, to YouTube. Everyone is letting their world be so loud, and the voice of truth, the great comforter, his voice is being squashed out. So I feel like my whole focus has been to teach people to be still.
Yeah.
Know that he's God, I feel like, that I've been learning and relearning, going deeper and deeper in that journey with myself, and hopefully encouraging people to do the same, because you can always go deeper. There's always more. I've also been learning in the midst of uncertainty to just keep ministering to God's heart. As a worship leader, going through song selections, there are many songs that talk about God provides our breakthrough. God can do it again. God is, whatever, going to win the battle for us. And these are all good things and all true things. But what I find my heart longing for is to not always sing about what God can do, and just speak to who he is.
Yes.
God, you are beautiful. You are the best father. You are the most intentional lover, just ministering to his heart, blessing him, being a friend to God. And what I've noticed when I do that, do you think he just sits there and soaks it up? Oh gosh, no, he sings back over you. Says, yes. And
so good.
When I say, God, I love you with my heart, soul, and my mind, he says, Amy, I love you with my heart, with my soul, with my mind. Like, teaching people to maybe not even give their problems so much focus, because we're already defeated if that's the biggest thing in our world. One of the best tactics of the enemy is to make God's kids feel like we're on the losing side, to make the darkness feel like it is overpowering. But I tell you what, on the way to Nashville to see Ed Cash and you, we were at the Mammoth Cave, and we did a tour of all of the cool pathways and tunnels. And there was one room where the leader told all of us to turn off our electronics and to feel the weight of the darkness. And it was a magnificent darkness. Like, it was so cool. I've never seen or not seen a pitch black room like that. And the what do you call the tour guide, he takes out his lighter, and it was the tiniest flame, but it lit up the whole cave. And the deception is that the enemy makes us feel like we're powerless, but it doesn't take a lot of light to make the darkness flee. It takes a little. And if people knew the power that we carry as God's children, as his royal family, we would have a boldness, we would have a confidence. And I would like to see the kingdom expanding as sons and daughters rise up and live out their confidence, even now, and especially now.
Especially now.
Especially now. We're not powerless. We are.
People are waking up.
Yeah. And that's perhaps 2020, the year of 2020 vision. Maybe
right.
This is the great awakening. Maybe this is the year we see clearly, because a lot of the time we can see clearer when we're not distracted, when our idols are finally weeded out of our lives, and we start to see, oh, that's what I'm trusting in. That's why I'm crumbling, because my hope was in fill in the blank.
Yeah. It makes us very aware, and like you said, very exposed to what our true nature is, what our true intentions are, where we place our identity and our hope. If it was in jobs or money or anything that is now gone, then people are feeling that and realizing, they put their hope in something that could just be gone. And so if we put our hope in God, he's unwavering, he's unchanging, and he's still on the throne. His work has not stopped.
Yes.
And God is working in so many ways because people are listening. I know our pastor said that, the searches on Google for prayer are at an all-time high because people are getting back to prayer in a time where we realize we can't just get distracted with things. We can't just, look to sports or look to even, our jobs, our careers, our music, like none of that. We have to come back to what's most important. And so people are realizing that connection with God is, either missing or it's not as strong as they want it to be. And so people are coming back. I think it's a time of revival, and people are, especially musicians, I feel, are going to a deeper level of faith because of this time of uncertainty and the unknown, and realizing, we weren't in control anyway, but realizing how much we're really not in control of our own circumstances and the realities, but realizing we know who is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's when everything changes.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think if we let it, we can let the suffering, if I can even say, I haven't suffered. I don't even know suffering compared to the person that doesn't even have a roof over their head or whatever. But if we can let the hardship or the trial bear good fruit, if we invite God to do his work. Because for other people, it's an opportunity to become bitter and to become angry. And you see both reactions, right?
Yeah.
People who are, just not having any of it. And there's an aggressiveness to them. I'm not saying that we can't be angry or that we can't have our off days. It's a human emotion. It's a part of how we function. We need to go through these emotions. But at the end of the day, when we're looking for the movements of God, we can let a time like this multiply our productivity, multiply our spiritual depth, whatever it is, he's God. And when he has his way, when he enters into a situation, he will never leave it less beautiful than how he found it. He will always leave it extravagantly full of hope. So yeah, these are exciting times, my friend, even though they are weird.
Yeah, definitely weird. Yeah. I mean, it's different for all of us too. And so I know that everyone's got their own perspective of what's going on, and the situation looks different for every person. And so in a way, we're all going through this at the same time, where before, people would kind of be doing their own thing, but all of a sudden we're like an even playing field. It's like we all get it on a global scale. We're dealing with the same thing at the same time, and in an unprecedented way. And so we've heard those things, I feel like, over and over. And so in a way, I think people are ready to look forward, to move forward, like what's next, what's the future going to look like. And so for the people listening who are, they're hearing what we're saying about a deeper walk with God and not being afraid and not staying in that place, what encouragement would you give about moving forward?
Well, the first thing I would say is do not spend more time in the media or social media than you do in the scriptures or in your prayer closet, because we need to make intentional effort to make his voice the loudest, because otherwise you can't win, because God speaks in a small voice. God doesn't stand at the top of a mountain and scream at us. His voice is gentle and it's soft. And I always thought, why don't you scream? And it's because he's not far away. He whispers because he's close. And if we don't take the time to be still, then we will miss that moment. So I would, really limit the amount of time and the amount of headspace and authority you are giving these external sources of information. The number one tactic of media is fear. It's how it is. Yeah. The second thing is that I would suggest, and that works for me, is to take time to identify and sit with your emotions. Identify, what are you feeling? Because here's the thing, a lot of people will say, I don't know why I'm feeling this, I just feel. And I get it. I've been there before, where it's like, I don't know why I'm feeling this. But if you think about it, there's always the reason why. There's always the why. Human thought is not as random as we sometimes think it is. And sit and identify what it is you're believing. Start to think about what you're thinking about.
Yes.
Pay attention to it. And then study the life and the practices of Jesus first. I mean, there's lots of places in the Bible where you could tap into, but I mean, the Son of God, no one really tops him. So start to look at, like, how was Jesus functioning as a human on this earth? What were his practices? Start to read his prayers. Start to read, like, his thoughts, what he thinks about a world that is suffering, what he thinks about anger or fear, what Jesus thinks about loving your neighbor or your enemy or whatever it is. Just tap into what he was saying. And then maybe start to sit with the Lord, and instead of saying, what would Jesus do in this situation? Because Jesus is not a blonde-haired 30-something-year-old woman. Start to ask, what would Jesus do if he were me? If he was in my time period, if he had my financial status, if he had my career, my life, what would Jesus do? Or what would Jesus do if he were me? And what does love require of me to do? Because
that's a good question.
Right? Like there are always ways to practice Jesus' way, whether it's sending encouraging texts. I mean, who's encouraging people right now? I don't know. Like, do you know how many people would, I mean, I make a habit to, at the forefront of my mind when I'm in conversation with people, okay, God, what are you saying about this person? Or even if I'm not checking in with God, because God lives inside of me, I don't always have to like have this in-depth conversation. It's just like encourage somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know, just start noticing the things that God is saying about people and about the atmosphere and about life. And pretty soon it's the biggest thing that you see. It's the most important thing. And here's the thing, Lydia, it's like there's so much information coming at us and we're all trying so hard to discern, and people are very passionate about multiple sides.
Right.
And sometimes I can get angry at like, oh my goodness,
sure.
Why don't people see this? Why don't people see that? And I realized like, oh my goodness, I am falling into the trap that the enemy wants me to fall into, which is looking for reasons to divide, looking for reasons to label people or to distance myself or whatever it is. And I think we're losing hardcore if we are in our conversations being divisive. Yeah. I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but that's my
well, let's go back around to, you talked about believing the lies and those thoughts in your head that you're thinking and observing your thoughts, but then reminding yourself of the truth. And so you're observing and realizing, oh, why am I feeling this way? Why am I thinking this? What lie am I believing that's causing me to feel this way? And so you're analyzing your thoughts, your feelings, and then bringing it back to, well, what is true?
Yep.
So I think that's a really important point to make, because as we are dealing with emotions and dealing with circumstances, being steady and strong and consistent in the midst of a storm is something that is part of Jesus's character. And so if we can think about scriptures, how many times did he say, don't be afraid? I've heard people say that in scriptures it's in there 365 times. That's enough for every day of the year. Do not be afraid. And it's not a recommendation. It's a command to not be afraid. So it's not based on the circumstances. He's giving us a command to not fear because he's with us in the midst of the storm.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I almost wish you could throw at me a list of circumstances, and I would love to speak to every one of those lies, you know? Obviously, sometimes when we try and think of it, it's like, oh, what lies? I mean, like, for me, a big one is I'm missing out on my family that is in Canada, and I can't see them.
Oh, yeah. So focusing on what you can't do instead of what you can do. Yeah, that was a big one for me too in the last few weeks, of just making that switch, like literally asking myself the question after I heard myself rambling and saying, well, I can't do this and I can't do this. Then I thought, well, what can I do?
Yeah.
I can call somebody. I can send a letter in the snail mail. I can do, whatever it is. And then whatever you're thinking about shifts your focus. And so if you're asking your mind, what can I do? Your mind is going to answer with all these things that you can do.
Yes.
So it's leading yourself out of the focus of what you can't do. So what about that one for you?
Yeah, it's the same thing. The Lord's showing me that, one, it's okay to grieve that, and it's a normal human emotion, and that is fully appropriate, and it is a welcome emotion. But number two, that like God is the great redeemer. So just because this season is the way it is now, it doesn't mean that's going to be the reality forever. And so
Right.
that God in his wisdom and in his creativity and in his power, he will restore an opportunity for me to be with family and to leave that in his care. You know, when I first got sent home from tour, I didn't have any financial backing. Every one of my events that month and beyond was not there. That's how I make money. That's my entire income.
Right.
To be honest, okay, well, my husband does work, and so it's not like we would be out on the streets, but there are other expenses that we took into consideration when we got our house, and with other things in our lives that, like, we kind of depend on my income as well.
Sure.
But like, to be honest, I wasn't nervous about it. I just thought, you know what? Even if we have to leave this house and live in an apartment, even if we lose it all, I'm still a daughter of God. I'm still married to my best friend. Like, that's it. If I want to follow this to the worst scenario.
If that's your worst case scenario, it's not that bad.
It's not that bad. I do that a lot because...
No, I think that's a good practice of thinking, well, what is the worst thing that could happen? And what would I do in that situation? And then you have a plan for your worst case scenario.
Yeah, because, like, here's the thing. The enemy, like, wants to dangle, what if? And so I'm like, okay, humor me. What if? Let's go there.
Yeah, and face it.
Yeah. Would I still have a purpose? Would I still be with the Lord? Absolutely. Well, then I'm good.
Yeah.
And that might be a really big leap for some people. I get it. And if you're not there, you don't need to freak out and shame yourself, because everybody's in their own process, and the Lord knows that. But I'm just going through some of the exercises in my head. But basically, there will never be a sentence you write out about your life that maybe feels heavy or that maybe feels hard. There will never be anything about your life that God cannot rewrite a more hopeful version of that. Like, God is so good and infinitely wise. And our lives are not in the hands of somebody random, of somebody who's sometimes has good days and sometimes has bad days, someone who's like a bipolar. Our lives are in the hands of perfect love. I mean, it doesn't get any better. Our lives are in the hands of perfect love himself. Of, like, I love to refer to him as perfect love, not just love, but it's the best version. There is no greater version of, like, he is love himself personified. Yeah, like, his kindness holds your whole life. And when we practice that by, okay, God, this is what I'm believing, now speak over it. I'll finish this story. I was out of job, and then a few weeks later, I get employed by a church. And to me, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I was just like, of course you would, Papa. Like, you have me in the palm of your, of course you have a job for me.
Yeah.
And those moments, I think, help people build trust with the Lord. If you're doubting your future, take an inventory. Look back at your life. Look at your history with the Lord. Like, he's been pursuing you ever since you were born, and he doesn't stop because COVID hits.
Right. Yeah. He's the same.
Yeah. I think for the most part, when people fear, it shows that we actually don't believe God is good and that he loves us. To the degree we fear is to the degree we don't believe God is good or that he loves us. And when we can start to believe that he actually is good and he actually does love us, well, perfect love casts out the fear then. And
yes.
I mean, that's scripture, so I'm not making that up.
Right. It's so good and so important to remember at any time, and especially when times are hard. And so I think all that we've been talking about is so spot on, so timely, and I know that it's going to encourage people listening. So thank you for sharing from, your thoughts and your experiences, and with, conversations that you've had and what you've been learning through this season in the last few months, and really your entire life that has led up to this point. I mean, it's a lifelong journey of discipleship and following Christ. And so, like you said, there's always more. And I hope that one of the things that we said today would really shift someone's mindset towards a deeper walk with God. So thank you, Amy, for being willing to share from your heart. I do want to let people know how they can hear your music and connect with you. So what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. I'm probably mostly on Facebook and Instagram. To find those links, you can just go to amysavin.com, and all the little cute little icons are up there. Or just type my name in the search engines or whatever. But yeah, I think those are my main. I also have a YouTube channel that may or may not have more content coming.
Yay, it should keep it coming. I know you've been doing Facebook Lives, you've been doing some worship nights on Facebook. That's amazing. So keep up the great work, making music, making videos, putting that encouragement out there. And I just want to affirm that what you're doing is so needed. So thank you for being a voice of calm and peace during this time.
Well, thanks, Lydia, so much for having me.
Thanks for being on the show.
A dear friend and a deep well, and I bless the work that you do. You are indeed a light during this time as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this interview. I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel for even more videos like this coming soon, and check out the whole list of previous episodes at rusticsongbird.com/podcast.